Think back to the last time you pulled away from someone who actually treated you well. Or the last time you chased someone who barely gave you the time of day. What if I told you that reaction wasn't really about them at all? What if it was written into you before you even had your first crush, before you even understood what love was? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most of our adult dating patterns were not invented in adulthood. They were installed in childhood, often before we could even speak in full sentences. The way your caregivers responded to your cries, your needs, your fears, your excitement, all of it built a kind of internal blueprint. And that blueprint doesn't retire once you grow up. It quietly drives the car while you think you're the one holding the wheel. Today, we're going to walk through 8 signs that your childhood is still shaping your love life right now. Not to blame anyone, not your parents, not yourself, but to help you finally see the pattern clearly enough to change it. Because here's the hopeful part. Once you can see a pattern, you are no longer at its mercy. Awareness is the first real step toward rewriting the story. This idea comes from something called attachment theory, first developed by psychiatrist John Bowlby in the mid-20th century, and later expanded by psychologist Mary Ainsworth through her research on how infants respond to their caregivers. Their work showed something remarkable. The way a baby learns to seek comfort, tolerate distance, or brace for disappointment becomes a template. And that template tends to echo, sometimes almost exactly, in the romantic relationships we form decades later. So before we get into the 8 signs, let's talk about why this happens at all. Because understanding the mechanism is what makes the signs make sense, instead of just feeling like a list of random dating habits. When you were very small, you had no ability to regulate your own emotions. If you were scared, hungry, or overwhelmed, you needed another person to help calm your nervous system down. Psychologists call this co-regulation. Over thousands of tiny moments, being picked up, being soothed, being ignored, being met with warmth or with frustration, your brain began drawing conclusions. Not conscious conclusions, but felt ones. Conclusions like, when I need comfort, it comes. Or, when I need comfort, I have to fight for it. Or, when I need comfort, it's safer not to ask at all. These conclusions don't stay in childhood. They form the foundation of what researchers call an attachment style. And that style becomes the lens through which you interpret closeness, distance, conflict, and love itself for the rest of your life, unless you actively examine it. So let's talk about the mechanism a little more deeply, because this is the part that changes everything once it clicks. Your nervous system doesn't distinguish neatly between then and now. When a partner goes quiet for a few hours, your logical adult brain might say, they're probably just busy. But your nervous system, especially if it learned early on that silence often meant abandonment, may respond as though you are in actual danger. Your heart rate rises. Your thoughts spiral. You might text 3 times in a row. Or you might go completely cold and distant yourself, preemptively protecting against a rejection that hasn't even happened yet. This is what psychologists mean when they talk about implicit memory. Unlike the memories you can consciously recall, implicit memory lives in the body, in emotional reflexes, in the instant reactions you have before you've even had time to think. You may not remember the specific moments from age 2 or 3 that shaped your attachment style, but your body remembers the feeling, and it replays that feeling every time a relationship touches a similar nerve. This is why so many capable, intelligent adults find themselves repeating the same relationship pattern over and over, even when they consciously want something different. It isn't a lack of willpower. It's an old survival strategy, still running quietly in the background. Now let's get into the signs themselves, because once you can name them, you can start to work with them instead of being run by them. The first sign is what researchers often call anxious preoccupation. This shows up as a persistent fear of abandonment, a tendency to need frequent reassurance, and a habit of reading too much into small changes in tone or response time. If your childhood involved a caregiver who was loving but inconsistent, warm one day, distracted or overwhelmed the next, your nervous system may have learned that love is something you have to monitor closely, or it might disappear. The second sign is the opposite pattern, often called avoidant self-reliance. This looks like discomfort with too much closeness, a strong pull toward independence, and a tendency to shut down emotionally when a partner wants deeper intimacy. This pattern often develops when a child's emotional needs were met with discouragement, or when vulnerability was treated as inconvenient. The child learns, "I will be fine on my own," and that belief becomes armor in adulthood. The third sign is choosing partners who feel familiar rather than partners who feel healthy. This is one of the most misunderstood patterns in modern dating. We tend to assume attraction is random, almost magical. But research on relationship patterns suggests that we are often unconsciously drawn to dynamics that mirror our early emotional environment, even when that environment was painful. Familiar can feel like chemistry, even when it is actually just recognition. The fourth sign is difficulty accepting consistent, calm love. If steady affection was rare in your early life, sudden steadiness in adulthood can feel strange, even suspicious. Some people describe feeling bored or unsure around emotionally available partners while feeling a stronger pull toward those who are harder to read. That reaction isn't a sign that calm love is wrong for you. It's a sign that your nervous system associates love with effort and uncertainty, and it hasn't yet learned that ease can be safe too. The fifth sign is overfunctioning in relationships, meaning you find yourself constantly managing the emotional temperature of the relationship, smoothing things over, anticipating your partner's moods, and prioritizing their comfort over your own needs. This often develops in children who took on a caretaking role early, sometimes for a parent who struggled emotionally. The child learns their value comes from being helpful and easy, and carries that role directly into adult partnerships. Now, here's where we shift from insight into practice, because naming a pattern is powerful, but learning to work with it is what actually changes your life. The first core technique is what therapists sometimes call name it to tame it, a phrase popularized by psychiatrist Daniel Siegel. When you notice a strong emotional reaction in a relationship, panic after an unanswered text, sudden coldness when someone gets close, pause and simply name what's happening internally. You might say to yourself, "This is my anxious pattern activating," or "This is my instinct to withdraw." This simple act of naming shifts activity from the reactive, emotional part of the brain toward the calmer, more reflective part, giving you a few extra seconds to choose your response instead of being hijacked by it. The second technique is deliberately practicing what psychologists call earned security. This means you don't need a perfect childhood to build a secure attachment style as an adult. Research consistently shows that people can shift from insecure patterns toward secure ones through corrective relational experiences, meaning relationships, friendships, or even therapeutic relationships where someone responds to your needs with consistency and warmth over time. Every time you experience steady, safe connection and consciously let yourself trust it, rather than testing it or sabotaging it, you are laying new neural groundwork. You are proving to your own nervous system that safety can last. The third technique is separating the story from the sensation. When your body reacts strongly, ask yourself, what does this feeling remind me of? Rather than immediately assuming it's proof about your current partner. Often you'll find the intensity of the reaction is coming from an old wound, not the present moment. This doesn't mean your feelings aren't valid. It means you get to respond to today's relationship, rather than reliving yesterday's. Let's bring this together with the final signs, and then talk about where you go from here. The sixth sign is fear of conflict, where disagreement feels dangerous rather than normal, so you avoid honest conversations to keep the peace. The seventh sign is testing your partner, whether through withdrawal, jealousy, or pushing boundaries, as an unconscious way of asking, will you still stay if I'm difficult? And the eighth sign is difficulty trusting good things, a quiet suspicion that if a relationship feels too good, something must be wrong, or it won't last. If you recognized yourself in several of these, take a breath. This isn't a diagnosis, and it isn't a life sentence. These patterns were once intelligent adaptations. They helped you survive an emotional environment that may not have offered consistent safety. The problem isn't that you developed them. The problem is only that they've stayed switched on long after they stopped being necessary. The encouraging truth backed by decades of attachment research is that these patterns are not fixed traits. They are learned responses, and learned responses can be updated. It takes intention. It takes practice. And often it takes the experience of being in relationships, or even friendships, that respond differently than your early environment did. Every time you notice a pattern, instead of blindly obeying it, you are quietly rewriting the blueprint. So, here is what I'd invite you to do this week. Pick just one sign from this list that felt uncomfortably familiar. Just one. Then, the next time that pattern shows up, the urge to test, the urge to withdraw, the urge to overfunction or over-explain. Simply pause and name it. You don't have to fix it in that moment. You just have to notice it. That single act of noticing is the beginning of change, because you cannot rewrite a pattern you refuse to see. Your childhood shaped the first draft of how you love and how you expect to be loved. But a first draft is never the final version. With awareness, patience, and consistent small choices, you can build a version of love that feels less like survival and more like genuine safety. If this video helped you understand yourself a little more clearly, consider subscribing, because we explore the psychology behind our relationships, our habits, and our emotional patterns every week, and I'd love to help you keep uncovering the hidden mechanics behind your own story. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.